Uh, so a very good and warm morning to all. At the outset, I, on behalf of the department and on my own behalf, wholeheartedly welcome the distinguished speaker and participants to the first technical session of day 4 of this one-week online Atal FDP sponsored by AICTE and organized by the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Mizoram University. With due permission of the respected speaker, I start this session. But before I request our honorable speaker to conduct the session, let me have the privilege and honor of presenting the profile of our esteemed speaker. So dear participants, today we have with us Professor Pavitra Kumar Mishra, an eminent academician. Professor Mishra is professor at the Department of Economics and Dean of the School of Social Sciences, Central University of Punjab, Bhatinda, Punjab, and Associate Dean Academics of the university. Prior to his joining the Central University of Punjab, he worked in different higher educational institutions such as Central University of Ranchi, Jharkhand, Government College of Engineering affiliated to Biju Patnaik University of Technology, Orissa, and others. Professor Mishra obtained his MA in Analytical and Applied Economics from Utkal University, Bhubaneswar, Orissa, and accomplished his MPhil in Economics from Annamalai University, Tamil Nadu. He was conferred with PhD in Economics from Department of Analytical and Applied Economics, Utkal University. He has a teaching experience of 25 years at UG and PG levels. His area of specialization includes economics of growth and development, quantitative economics, financial and tourism economics. His research interest is in the field of development economics, financial economics, tourism economics, energy economics. Professor Mishra has completed various certificate courses like certificate course in the challenges of global poverty from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 2013 by Professor Abhijit V. Banerjee and Professor Esther Duflo. He has also completed a certificate course in Principles of Economics with Calculus from the California Institute of Technology in 2014 by Professor Antonio Rengel. Professor Mishra has published 136 high-quality research papers and articles in nationally and internationally acclaimed and reputed journals, and 13 book chapters in edited volume at national and international levels. He has published 17 books with national and international publishers. He has completed 2 research projects, 1 minor and 1 major. He has guided 1 postdoc, 5 PhDs already completed, and 7 PhDs are ongoing. Professor Mishra has about 40 papers and 32 lectures at national and international level seminars, conferences, workshops, training sessions, orientation, refresher course, faculty development programs. Sir has organized more than 17 seminars, conferences, workshops. He is the reviewer of more than 30 Scopus Web of Science indexed and UGC care listed national and international level journals. His research impact is citations 1313, H index 19, I10 index 33. So far as MOOCs development is concerned, Professor Mishra has developed 2 modules for annual online refresher program for higher education faculty in educational research under MOOCs through SWAYAM platform of MHRD Government of India. So with this, Professor Mishra is also a member of several professional bodies such as regular member American Economic Association USA, life member the Indian Econometric Society India, life member Indian Commerce Association India, and many more. He is also one of the review board members of a number of reputed journals. Some of them are Afro-Asian Journal of Finance and Accounting, InterScience journals, Brussels Economic Review, Brussels University, Business Perspective and Research, Sage Publications, Current Science, Indian Academy of Sciences, FIIB, Business Review, Sage Publications, and the list goes on. So with this brief introduction, I would once again welcome Professor P.K. Mishra to this one-week online Atal FDP. And without taking any more time, I would request sir to preside over the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Although I do not deserve so much of introduction. So, first of all, I am an academician and a researcher. This should be the introduction. These 2 sentences, 2 words. This will be sufficient for me. So, I am thankful to the Mizoram University and especially to the to your department for inviting me to be a speaker in this 1 week online faculty development program. I am really grateful and thankful to the head of the department, Dr. Himanshu Bhushan Raut, for considering and recognizing, in fact, my expertise. And he thought that I would be able to deliver on economic perspectives of this cultural heritage. So, with your permission, already it is 8 minutes past, so time is limited. So, if with the permission of the chair, I would be starting my presentation. If I am allowed, I may share my screen.
Sir, please, sir. Sir, please.
Thank you. So, I hope my screen is visible to you.
Yes, sir. It is visible. Kindly make it full screen, sir.
Is it
Yes,
okay
sir.
now?
Yes, sir.
So it is my honor. Just I stop my video to deliver in audio. Actually, this will be the best delivery. So it is my honor to speak on economic perspectives of cultural heritage. These days, actually, the government of India is also providing scholarships on cultural economics. So anyone who is a scholar of cultural economics or intends to conduct research in cultural economics can approach the relevant department for scholarship. Fellowships are available, interruption. So that's why I thought I should speak to the forum on this particular topic, economic perspective of cultural heritage. So when we begin with the concept economic perspective, it is always justified to give some focus on the concept, the background of that basic concept, that is cultural heritage. I do not know, other speakers, eminent speakers might have delivered very valuable and informative lecture on this particular issue, that is cultural heritage. However, briefly, I will just in 5 to 6 minutes I will complete the backdrop. Then I will enter into that economic perspective. That economic perspective I will discuss from information point of view. Also, I will put forward some research perspective. If anyone will be interested in the future, can write also proposal on that perspective and can submit to funding agencies like Ministry of Culture. You can also submit to ICSSR and others for necessary funding. So this is the most challenging and the most growing and developing area of research. So as we understand, cultural heritage is the legacy that we receive from the past, experience in the present, and we always transmit to future generations. So it is an expression of the ways of living developed by a community and passed on from generation to generation. So what are the things that we pass on from generation to generation, that we experience also at present? So our customs, practices, several places, objects, artistic expressions, and values. So we can classify them into 2, tangible and intangible. Places, objects, etc. are the tangible heritage, but customs, practices, folklore, values, ethics, ethos, so all these we always classify as intangible cultural heritage. So in this broad jargon, cultural heritage includes cultures, customs, beliefs, practices, rites, rituals, ceremonies, indigenous knowledge, social customs, traditions, art and craft, music, folklore, political and ideological beliefs that influence our culture and behavior, history, practices concerning the natural environment, religious and scientific traditions, language, sports, food, beverage, traditional clothing, all this cyber technology, whatever we are developing in these days, all we are, creating at some point of time, and then we experience it, and then we pass on to the future generation for use. So I can say we cherish it, we should protect it, and we should maintain it. Then only we can call it sustainable. So heritage is the dynamic notion. Why it is a dynamic notion? Because it is always created at one point of time. Then it continue to be used, by generation and generation. So therefore, this is a dynamic notion. Why this is dynamic again? Because it is with respect to time. Number two, it is changing to some extent. So the same custom we are following in different generations, sometimes with a little modification, with little improvement. So to that extent also this is dynamic. So the intangible cultural heritage are mostly dynamic, that adapts itself to different cultural contexts, social perspective, institutional standpoints, economic activities, and environmental surroundings. So realizing this dynamic nature and importance of cultural heritage in different socio-economic and environmental perspective, Sustainable Development Goal 11 in its target number 11.4 explicitly mentions to strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage. So in US, it has been envisaged to promote and implement sustainable consumption and production patterns with respect to cultural heritage. And it is not late. In India, the effort has already been started how we can make the sustainable consumption and production of cultural heritage. And whenever we speak about consumption and production and sustainability, always we enter into, knowingly or unknowingly, the periphery of the scope of economics, both theoretical economics and applied economics. So here the pure cultural economics is actually the theories. There are theories, there are principles, there are norms which guide our economic perspectives, but mostly heritage economics is practical, so it is applied. Before we enter into the heritage economics, cultural economic perspective, it is always important that we should take a stock of the cultural heritage that is available in India. You all must be knowing. However, it is always a responsibility of the speaker to create a backdrop. So I have tried to create a backdrop of the the existence, presence, and practices that are related to cultural heritage in our motherland, in our country. So when the entire world is setting itself to a new normal, succeeding to the devastating repercussions of the public health hazard, coronavirus pandemic. Cultural heritage can contribute to the identity and branding of a territory, being most relevant in an age of globalization and fierce competition, while creating a strong base for sustainable and endogenous development. So you know that in these about 2 years, we have seen a new normal. So the entire world have realized that the way we lived in up to the February 2020 may not be sustainable in future courses of action because of the sudden outbreak of pandemics like coronavirus, COVID-19 virus. Therefore, we have to create a new identity, new branding, new perspective in which everything should be redefined. So, this is reorienting everything requires reconsideration of everything. So in this perspective, today I will make my deliberation. So here my objective is how we can actually place our cultural heritage, giving itself it a new identity and creating a brand, for our territory that is a land of cultural heritage. India's incredible tangible and intangible heritage have immense potential to contribute to the growth and development of the country. To name a few, the Taj Mahal, Sun Temple, Konark, Qutub Minar, Jain Cave, Jain Temple, Golden Temple, Sanchi Stupa, Christian Church of Goa, India Gate, and many more are tangible cultural heritage, have all been cherished, protected, and maintained by ancestors. Sorry, there is some issue. Why it has been changed like this? So, have all been cherished, protected, and maintained by ancestors from generation to generation. Among the tangible cultural heritage, the contributions of Buddhayan, Aryabhat, Bhaskaracharya in the field of mathematics, astronomy, and astrology, Varahamihir in the field of physics, Nagarjuna in the field of chemistry, Sushruta, and Charak in the field of medicine, Patanjali in the field of yoga are profound treasures. So, the objective now is to make India the world guru. So, this branding world guru can only be justified when we focus on, our cultural heritage. Our culture is so rich. We have, so many, Vedanta, Upanishad, so many valuable scripts which can give us this new brand. So, we world gurus, others should speak us, tell us that India is the world guru. So, we have to create our identity. Sorry for a minute. Sorry for interruption. Actually, in the northern India, especially in Punjab, now the environment is highly polluted. Most of the people, they are suffering from throat infection due to high pollution. Our farmers, they are burning the remaining part of that paddy crops. So this is their custom, their tradition. However, this is not a cultural heritage. This is not sustainable. So India's cultural history dates back to Bhimbedak, Betaka cave painting era of Stone Age. This is located in Madhya Pradesh. To the recent Victorian architecture and abstract painting. Cultural diversity and heritage are an assets that everybody can understand. Traditional knowledge of medicine, nature, phonetics, metrics, politics, and so on is our legacy conserved for years. Cultural diplomacy can reinforce friendship, allies with new nations, expand trade in others. We can learn from Japan the best practice of planting saplings at its religious site, which can pave a new way to establish strategic cooperation. India, a land with history of millennia, boasts rich cultural heritage and archaeology. We have 1,000 years of historical, cultural, and religious evolution that is eternal and can become the driver for growth and development. At present, India has 40 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and I hope this number is certain to grow in the years ahead. The rich cultural heritage of the country has strong potential to be the hubs for economic activities which can be leveraged for meeting the target of being a 5 trillion economy. The presence of cultural sites, services, and art forms tends to boost tourism, sustain livelihoods, attract investment, while preserving our history, generation of knowledge, and nurturing the creativity. However, economic gains of cultural heritage are based on the use of specialized expertise, labor power, and materials, science and technology that are available locally, nationally, and globally. Thus, assessment of benefits and costs from socio-economic and cultural aspects are essential when leveraging cultural heritage for economic gains. So how the cultural heritage can be leveraged, can be used for making economic gains? And what are the benefits that we expect? We expect tremendous fillip to our domestic and international tourism if we focus on cultural heritage. If we focus on cultural heritage, it will lead to increased employment opportunities. The very objective of Make in India program initiative, create world-class infrastructure. It will help us creating world-class infrastructure. It will certainly augment the sale of local handicrafts, thereby boosting the local economy. And in all this, it will definitely give birth a new class of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial opportunities. So if these are the economic benefits that we are going to see, going to realize, if we are leveraging, if we are focusing on cultural heritage, then what are the strategies that India should follow to make such huge economic benefits from cultural heritage? Some of the important strategies include renovating and developing cultural sites using local resources through Make in India initiatives, providing incentives to investors and developers of heritage sites, facilitating exciting visits, developing transport facilities to cultural sites, maintain cleanliness and sanitation around the cultural sites to attract visitors, ensuring safety and security of foreign visitors. The third most important thing is to organize cultural events at venues that are lesser known but culturally rich, involving private sector in the development and promotion of heritage tourism. In European countries, a private sector has been observed to be very successful in maintaining the heritage sites. So we have to learn from that, and we have to also ensure the participation of private sector. Of course, monitoring, supreme monitoring of government of India. So it will be important to position exhibition galleries and museums near cultural sites, portraying music.
Sorry to interrupt. Sir Kumar Srinivas Patnaik, please mute yourself. Sorry to interrupt. Kumar Srinivas Patnaik, please unmute yourself. May I request Kumar Srinivas Patnaik to mute yourself?
Dr. Rajdeep, please mute Kumar Srinivas.
So thank
Sir,
you very
please
much.
continue.
So while organizing cultural events in lesser known culturally rich heritage sites, it is also equally important to place exhibition galleries, museums near those sites, portraying, displaying music, food, rituals, dress, personalities, sports, festivals, etc. associated with those particular sites, so that we can not only conserve our culture, our heritage, also we can economically gain out of it. Another strategy may be disseminating information and knowledge about cultural heritage in the entire world in the form of movies. The effort has been started. Historical movies have been now produced. So this is an effort towards conserving our cultural heritage. Concerts, exhibitions, books, seminars, advertisements, etc. Developing market for the sale of folk painting such as Madhubani can empower women and upkeep the culture as well. In December 2019, 47 Asia Pacific countries, they have signed a declaration to work on empowering women. So from 2020 onwards, the focus of the world has been towards empowering women, and they all accepted in that declaration that heritage tourism in particular and in tourism in general can be catalyzed to empower women. This is very, very important aspect that we have to focus on. Adopting cultural diplomatism, for example, inviting religious leaders of different countries to the sites to instill the importance of these sites. So when we visit, nobody recognizes. If a religious leader visits a particular place of that religious importance, then immediately the importance of that particular site increases. This is called giving identity. So we have to create the identity, then we can actually make it a brand. So step by step we have to work for facilitating huge conglomeration of Indian books and authors to expose Indians and foreigners' views to conserve rich Indian culture, literature, cultural literature through literature tourism. In this perspective, the effort by Rajasthan is always welcome. Actually, Rajasthan always organize or has started organizing literature tourism. This is one thing that other states should also adopt. Each state as well as the central government need to focus more on developing heritage sites with intelligent budget allocation. It is very, very difficult to allocate a cultural budget for development of sites. However, intelligently, the budget can be allocated, by state governments and central governments through different, programs like Monrega and others, and the labor power can be mobilized for the development as well as maintenance of heritage sites, and this will actually contribute towards economic gain. The economic gains can thus be optimized by making our rich cultural heritage available. First, we have to make the cultural heritage available. So we have to develop. Then we have to make them accessible. How the visitors from within the country and from outside the country, they will come to know about the cultural heritage sites and also intangible cultural items. So there should be pamphlets, there should be information books, there should be dedicated website. So through that the accessibility is created, and the visitor fee should be such that visiting should be affordable, so that it will attract the entire world. And all these things should be done in a sustainable way, so that we can preserve, we can conserve our heritage for future generations. Therefore, a choice is to be made. So whenever a choice is to be made, economics enters in the back door and is always seen in the front. So what is the choice? The choice between how much of such heritage should be made available for present consumption and how much should be conserved for future consumption. So this is very, very important. The choice between present and future. The present consumption should not reduce the total quantum of future consumption. If we are consuming to the extent of 10%, that 10% must be available, at least 10% should be available for future consumption. Means today, when we are consuming, that means that is available. What are not yet unexplored, we have to explore, we have to develop, we have to make available. So at least 10% should pass on to future generation, and if any delta is above that, then that is always a most welcome. 15%, 20%. So if we can make it 50% to 100%, then it is always the best. So several economic decisions, these are the research questions. The researchers in heritage economics, cultural economics, they are always in the welcome to solve these problems. Several economic decisions ought to be made. How much of resources are required for allocation of heritage between present and future? Because any development, availability, accessibility, and affordability, it is not free of cost. It is not free of cost. So it involves cost. So resource, but for example, India is a developing country. It is a resource scarce country. It is a capital deficient country. So that allocation, fund allocation, resource allocation should be, appropriate, should be optimal. There should not be any malallocation, misutilization of resources. So the scholars are welcome to suggest models. So cultural economics is very rich. many foreign economists, they are actually working on it and they have developed already the models. However, further developments are required. How the allocation problem, resource allocation problem between present use and future use can be solved. This is very, very important. For example, UNESCO has enlisted 40 at present 40 heritage sites in our country. Okay, very good. So 40 should be conserved and passed on to future generation. But in future, the number will increase. So how that can be increased? That can be increased by making available and giving identity and branding, giving a brand name to that particular site or to that particular intangible item, so that our heritage, so that the list, the UNESCO can enlist it. So this is very, very important. That depends upon preference of heritage consumers. So we have to develop that consumerism. We read in managerial economics, we read in by marketing management about consumerism. The world is now of consumers. The producers are producing whatever consumers are demanding. So when consumers they do not demand, producers they do not produce. So the production cycle of goods and commodities, depend upon the preference pattern of consumers. So here I use the word heritage consumer. So if we will always be scared of pandemics, epidemics, etc., and will not come out of our home, we will not visit our heritage places, and will not visit museums, fairs, festivals, etc., then definitely that consumerism will be lost. And when that consumerism will be lost, automatically, that heritage we cannot make available. We cannot make it accessible also. The third most important resource problem is how much of scarce materials and human resources are available for allocation to heritage conservation. So it is very, very important that we have to understand that whatever materials will be used, whatever human resources are to be deployed in the development and in conservation of heritage, our cultural heritage, that is always scarce. So keeping in mind that this is scarcity, the limitation of resources, the economic decision, the economic models should be developed. So since everything cannot be conserved, we understand.
So sorry to interrupt. Excuse me. So Mr. Sifela, can you please mute your audio? Mr. Sifela, can you please mute your audio? Mr. Sifela, please mute your audio. Mr. Sifela.
Excuse me, host. You can mute for all from
Yes,
your
sir,
end.
Yes, we are doing now. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Please, you please clear.
So it is very, very important that we have to keep in mind the most important thing, that economic resources are always scarce. It is limited. We cannot therefore conserve everything. And Why we cannot conserve everything, but our efforts should be made to conserve everything. But why it cannot be? Because of the effects of the natural forces of erosion, etc., climatic effect, etc. However, the effort should be there, to conserve everything. Therefore, digitalization, the technology can help in this regard. When this digitalization conservation will take place, at least digitally we can conserve many things, for thousands and lakhs of years. Then the fifth most important aspect is how much of other uses of resources must be sacrificed. So you see, already I told you, resources are scarce. So when resources are scarce, and when you are reallocating resources for development, for conservation of a heritage, definitely some consumption, some uses are to be sacrificed. But entire sacrificing is not possible. So therefore, this reallocation requires some sacrifice from our side. So what we should sacrifice? We should sacrifice the economic bads for adopting economic goods. Therefore, the choice is in economics is always made between the bad and good. What is bad and what is good? So what is bad? It is defined in economics. Those goods and services which actually provide us, fetch us, give us less satisfaction. So if consumerism is less, so that's the reallocation should be done. Resources should be diverted from that use towards the production and consumption of the goods and services where consumerism is more. So therefore, again, here we have to make an economic decision depending upon consumers' preference, actually, which resources are to be sacrificed, or where actually the resource and the reallocation should take place. This is actually technically this is called opportunity cost analysis of heritage conservation. So this is borrowed from that heritage economics or cultural economics. Heritage economics is a part of cultural economics. Cultural economics is a broad, very nice books are available. However, if you go through the latest research papers, you can find the research problems. The research problems you cannot find from the textbooks. So the sixth most important issue which is related to economics of heritage is, if public funds are to be used for maintenance and preservation of cultural heritage, whether taxpayers are willing to do so. Suppose I'm not in favor of this cultural heritage due to some or other reasons, due to my own preference. So when some tax will be imposed on me for maintaining and preserving, conserving the heritage, I may not reveal my willingness, show my willingness to pay that tax. So problems arise. So here problems arise when taxpayers' preferences differ from, because many a time we are materialistic, and because of this westernized consumerism, these days actually we have developed a new concept, actually westernized consumerism. Yesterday I was attending some seminar on that Swadeshi movement. So now actually another version of that Swadeshi movement has started. Okay, you might have read from history that Mahatma Gandhi started that Swadeshi movement, but modern form of that Swadeshi movement has again been started. We are again boycotting the Chinese product. Not only Chinese product, we have to boycott many products. So simply boycotting those actually is not sufficient, because we do not have our own products a substitute to that. Therefore, we have to develop our indigenous products so that again we can start our Swadeshi movement. So this is something different. However, here actually, why I'm telling you, because that westernized consumerism actually is making us materialistic. So the spiritualistic aspect of our cognitive mind is very less. You know, our cognitive mind is associated with three types of intelligence quotients, three types of quotients, measurable quotients in psychology terms. You must be knowing one is intelligent quotient, IQ, another is emotional quotient, EQ, and the third is spiritual quotient. That is spiritual quotient, that value is so less due to materialistic consumerism, westernized consumerism. Okay, what we are doing, we are not showing our full attention towards the development, maintenance, and conservation of our heritage, our culture. So therefore, whenever a tax will be imposed on this, definitely we will actually resist it, we will protect towards it, and we will not reveal our preference to pay it. Therefore, the spending capacity of the government will be relatively less. So if the public exchequer, if the treasury of the government will not collect money in terms of taxes, by borrowing we always cannot develop, and we always cannot preserve our heritage. So we have to change ourselves. We have to change ourselves. If we want to see India to be the world guru, okay, we have to actually create identity, give identity to our cultural heritage. Actually, we have to sacrifice many things. We have to sacrifice especially, the westernized consumerism pattern. So we have to switch our nature from materialistic consumerism towards spiritualistic consumerism, and we have to develop our emotional quotient value for that Swadeshi. Okay, therefore probably the scheme has been developed, introduced by the government of India, that is Swadesh Darshan, because we are not ready to see our country, each part. We have so many diverse culture, so many things at different corners, different parts of the country, and if at least one person will start visiting place to place, then it will be very difficult to complete all places in his lifetime. However, that any effort to that direction is always most welcome, because Swadesh Darshan, through Swadesh Darshan, what happens, that consumerism differs. And when consumerism differs, and you develop in that process the value of emotional quotients, you develop the value of that spiritual quotients. So what will happen? Definitely demand for heritage consumerism will increase. So this is one thing which will definitely help us in conserving, in developing and conserving our heritage. So to all these problems, quickly, it is very difficult to find out any solution. Deep research is required. Many researchers, they have already started researching. I was reading few days later, a research on different places in India. The researcher has collected information, applied, sophisticated factor analysis technique, that simultaneous equation modeling technique. Okay, that same analysis, so many things. So, and then structural equation modeling technique. There are two different techniques. One is simultaneous equation modeling, another is structural equation modeling. So that same is actually structural equation modeling. So in that way, actually, we are trying to find out solutions to these economic problems that are associated with heritage economics and that are associated with the cultural economics. And this will definitely be helpful in actually suggesting the ways out, making recommendations for public policy. However, as a quick solution, I can just tell you, borrowed from the researchers' outcomes. If we can interpret our cultural heritage as a cultural capital, as long as we will not consider our heritage a capital and heritage are to be interpreted in the same line. If we consider heritage as a place, then no economics can be applied to that. If that place will be converted to capital, means that place has some potential to earn money. Capital means which can be stored, which has a store of value. If it can be stored, then in future it can earn money. We put our money in the bank. Why we put our money in the bank? Because that is our money capital. It can earn money. We put our money in the share capital, on share capital in the share market, share capital. Why we invest on shares, stocks and shares? Because we earn money on that. So cultural capital. So if we make investment on cultural heritage and we will earn out of it, then all problems will immediately be solved. All problems. So reorienting, relooking, reinterpreting cultural heritage in terms of cultural capital can resolve all issues, and it can produce a sustainable solution. However, we should always adhere to the historical, aesthetic importance, significance of those cultural heritage. And we have to assign all those cultural experiences to our society, to our community, because all cultural heritage are associated with our lifestyle in some or other way, but that we have to identify. So the formulation of economic and cultural policy entails the evaluation and management of heritage in terms of depreciation, investment, rate of return, etc. All these words always we use when we construct a building. Then if we consider that an investment, then we always expect, if we can let out that building, how much of rent we will get. That is called a rate of return. And in how many years that building will depreciate, how much we have to spend, reinvest in terms of the renovation. So here again, similar interpretation. Here cultural sites have to be developed, heritage sites have to be developed. So when both tangible and intangible cultural heritage have to be developed, certainly they will depreciate. But we have to lessen the degree of that depreciation, the rate, the speed at which actually, you know, the sustenance of those cultural heritage are declining, depreciating due to passage of time, due to the climatic effect, etc. That we have to reduce. So we have to take the help of science and technology. So here science and technology can help us how we can protect. You know, when we write something, you know, in a piece of paper, and we keep that piece of paper for some time, let us say after 5 years, if we see that the paper color will change, it will be little brownish. Then after another 5 years, if you toss that piece of paper, then it may automatically break down. So how we can preserve a piece of paper, a book, a manuscript which is written by a you know, legendary person, and how we can conserve it for 1,000 years? So we have to take the help of science and technology. So now the technology is to digitize. We are digitizing our cultural library. We are developing our e-library system. This e-library system, actually, we are converting all that physically available to digital form. So depreciation can be protected. However, that expenditure is to be made. That is called depreciation cost. So new investment required, how, and all these have to be analyzed in relation to rate of return. How much of rate of return we'll get? Because if we go on only spending and investing, then at one point of time we'll see that we have nothing. Therefore, we have to convert that cultural heritage as cultural capital. So when we make investment on that, on development, on conservation, etc. And in future, we can capitalize it and we can get money out of it. So then interest will be created, then definitely, that will be conserved in appropriate manner. Considering heritage as a cultural capital, interventions are required, both from the public, I mean the government sector, and from the private sector in terms of fund allocation. Multinational companies are there, they are having the CSR, under that CSR, they are helping us, helping our society in providing free education, free medical facilities, etc. Can't we convince them, spend something for development of heritage sites, in preserving our cultural capital? So in this way, with the help of the MNCs, transnational companies, and if possible in private public joint partnership mode, that is partnership mode, PPP mode, okay, the project can be undertaken. So here actually we can evaluate that with the help of, there can be three models: a public model where there is only intervention by the government. Number two is only private, where only the private sector intervenes. Number three is a PPP mode, private public partnership mode. So these three projects, they must be evaluated from cost and benefit point of view. So how much of money are to be invested and how much of monetary benefits the society are expecting to get. So if benefits are at least more than the cost, then definitely the project should be undertaken. However, each heritage is associated with both economic and cultural values. So economic value is measurable. However, all economic values are not measurable. So economic values we classify into direct and indirect. Direct benefit, indirect benefit. Tourism has got also direct benefit, indirect benefit, because economic value is both measurable, monetary and non-monetary. So, but cultural value is always non-monetary. So therefore, the best rational decision is required in this regard, how actually the cost benefit analysis is to be undertaken. This can be formulated in the form of a project proposal. Here, two important questions arise. Two important decisions you have to make. How much revenue might be raised from community to maintain and preserve cultural heritage? This is the most important problem. How much of a revenue means, just I was telling you, just we have discussed, if a tax is to be imposed on the society, taxpayers may say, I am not interested for cultural heritage, so why I will pay 5 rupees on this particular product as a heritage tax? So you see, this resistance may come up. So the decision is very crucial in this regard. How to raise revenue, whether it will be tax revenue or non-tax revenue. From other sources, we can manage that money. Just now I was explaining you the concept of a CSR of MNCs, transnational companies. How much expenditure of public funds might be justified to secure the benefits of conservation of cultural heritage for the community? So first is revenue generation, second is expenditure. And for private expenditure, we are not worried. But for public expenditure, we are always worried. Because government has to spend on education, government has to spend on health, government has to spend on defense, government has to spend on infrastructure and so many things. So when in that infrastructure development, a portion can be earmarked for developing infrastructure to cultural sites, heritage sites. If this can be done, then automatically, that accessibility will be created. So these are two important questions of, the project appraisal. Just now I was telling you that economic values we classify into two. One is direct use value, another is indirect or non-use values. So direct use value of cultural heritage, whoever visits Taj Mahal pays a visitor fee. So that is the direct monetary benefit, direct economic value of cultural heritage that we can measure. And there are temples located in India which are richest in world. And probably, in history, foreign attacks might have been done on Somnath temple and etc. for this reason. So, however, cultural heritage has some, indirect, non-monetary values. And those non-monetary values are very, very important, more than the monetary value. And we classify them into three in research, in heritage research, in economics of heritage. One is existence value. So existence value is the value which people assign for the existence of an heritage item, even though they may not consume its services directly themselves. I may not be visiting, Taj Mahal every day, might not have visited, might not have any plan to visit Taj Mahal in my entire life, for example, but for its existence, I feel proud. My India has Golden Temple. In Punjab, we have Golden Temple. So we are proud of it. In Odisha, we have Jagannath Temple. We do not visit every day. We have Sun Temple, Konark Sun Temple. We do not visit every day. There may be people who might not have visited once till date, may not visit in their entire life, but they feel proud for the existence. So this is some cultural value, this is some economic value, which is existence value. And this existence value is otherwise called identity. So this identity we have to create. This is called spiritual quotient. So we must have respect. We must have a concern to all our cultural heritage. May be tangible, may be intangible. Second is option value. So what is that option value? Option value is the value which people assign for preserving the option that they or other might consume its services at some future time. You might have seen some people, they spend lots of money of their own in their villages to conserve, to preserve, the temples, old temples, mosque, etc. Maybe out of that spiritual value, cultural values, respect for the religion, etc. Some people, they out of their own enthusiasm, own interest, they develop some museums, libraries. So this is, the option value. This is called option value. They think that the future generation should use. The future generation should use. They realize today that the future generation should get the benefit of this. So therefore, this is called option value. This is very, very important. The last is bequest value. Bequest value is the value which people assign for making assets available to future generations. So people donate in different places. You must have noticed that people, they donate in lakhs, in crores sometimes. Why people donate to cultural sites, to religious sites? Because they think that the future generation should get the benefit of this culture, this particular value. So this is called bequest value. So these three are indirect but very, very important and can be expressed in monetary terms. And the way we express them in monetary terms is indirect. So therefore, this is called indirect economic value. So what is that indirect measure? We have to estimate the willingness of people to pay to preserve. If you ask a person how much you would like to pay to conserve Jain cave, Jain temple, if a person says, I will pay 10,000 rupees for its conservation, so this is the amount which can be considered as the economic value. So it is a typical type of economic modeling. There are techniques available known as contingent valuation methodology or choice modeling. So here we conduct market survey, market interview. So what happens, then we can understand what actually the willingness pattern of people, consumers, and accordingly we can assign the values, economic values to non-monetary benefits of heritage sites. Heritage assets, as I told you, are associated not only with economic values, are also with different types of cultural values. Cultural values are part and parcel, and therefore these are called cultural heritage. So cultural economics classify them into six categories. One is aesthetic value, that is displayed beauty. Something you see and you automatically, spontaneously you say beautiful, amazing. So that is called aesthetic value. Second is spiritual value. Several times I today explained what is that spiritual value. Everybody is having within the cognitive mind that spiritual value. And in psychology, the methods have been developed how we can measure that value in terms of SQ, spiritual quotient. These days, transnational corporations are hiring human resources based on all these three quotients. The intelligent IQ, EQ, and SQ. They are not worried about IQ. They are saying that everybody is intelligent. Of course, the degree of intelligence differs. So earlier focus was on IQ, but today the focus is on EQ and SQ. If somebody is having a high degree of EQ and SQ, will be ethical, will be respectful to others, will not do anything that is scientific misconduct, unethical practice. So this is very, very important. Another is social value. Another is historical value. So you must be knowing with that all heritage sites are associated with social importance, historical importance, and another important is symbolic value. This is symbolic value. Already I told you this is actually, this can be converted into identity. By that, sometimes we know a particular place. By that value, we sometimes remember a particular place. Because of that, we visit that particular place. So this is symbolic importance, the identity, the cultural personality of a particular community, place or item, anything. The authenticity value, it is very important that sometimes stories are built off, but we should not be mesmerized by those stories. We have to check whether the cultural heritage have any authenticity value. It is valued actually for its own sake, or a story has been built up for making an easy business model. So this is very, very important. So therefore, when public policy is to be designed, it is very, very important that not only economic values are taken into consideration, the cultural values must be taken into consideration. So both of these economic and cultural values are very significant and should be in right proportion, in right combination for effective heritage policy making, both in the public sector, in the private sector, and for both public and private interests. So we all in heritage economics, in cultural economics, we always start with the facts and figures. We always end with the policy suggestion. And here my task has completed, and I complete my presentation today. Now I would like to listen the comments or queries of participants if they wish.
Thank you, sir. So
Thank
I
you.
would now request the participants to ask few questions to the sir. Yes, participants, anyone having any questions, you can ask directly to the speaker today, Professor P.K. Mishra, sir. It seems that students have.
Good morning, sir. This is Dr. Rajesh Ramaswamy from Department of Tourism Hospitality Management. Sir, I have a doubt regarding product commercialization and customization. So, for example, if you take tourism industry, we are converting our heritage into a product. Their commodification is happening.
Yes.
So when we are doing commodification, we are losing some essence or social norms which need to be followed in that process.
Right.
So if we are doing the same thing in long run, whether we are going to lose that particular cultural heritage. So this is my question, sir.
Can you please repeat the last part? I could not hear it properly.
Question is related to commodification, sir, tourism product commodification. Now we are converting our heritage into tourism product. When we are involving in this process, so we are losing some social norms. For example, if you take any acts or any dance, it may be happening for 2 or 3 hours, but tourists are not interested to see that. So what these people are doing that.
Exactly. I was also. Now I got your question.
Yeah.
So
yes,
actually, I was also discussing the same point that sometimes that commodification is done without actually understanding the willingness of consumers. So many a time, the products, this is, the business model and the decision is taken from the private, the supplier or the public supplier or in PPP mode, whatsoever may be the situation. Many a time, the Ministry of Tourism also commodifies, many products, but it never attracts visitors. So why it is happening? Because it is only having some, business model, but it actually lacks 2 other parts. One is the spiritual aspect. Another point is that is cultural and what is that called social norms. So that's why you are saying that social values are being lost, not incorporated. So if we can redesign that product by assigning the social importance the spiritual importance, the cultural importance. So when that site is developed, when that product is designed, when, for example, a dress material is prepared, so preparing a handicraft, a dress material, that is also commodifying, a particular culture. So weaving culture. So with that, a booklet, with that a pamphlet should also be attached, justifying why this product is significant, why the people should respect it. And another thing, before that, that consumerism must be created, because our society is dominated by westernized consumerism. Very quickly we accept, we get actually mesmerized by, all those television advertisements, etc. Okay, and we are dragged towards that westernized products. So we are actually losing the importance over time, the indigenous products. So at the grassroots level, that awareness should be created, so that, the demand, some noise is again.
Participants are requested to kindly mute your mics. All the participants are requested.
So what is required actually, from the grassroots level, the effort should be started. The effort should be directed, from understanding the consumer behavior, their willingness, their preferences, what type of products they want, and from the particular place. If in a particular place a product is significant, so in that particular place actually that product should be marketed first, and then, that publicity should be started in nearby villages. So as we know, awareness always we start from our home, then we spread to our neighbors, and when we start from our village, then we spread to our neighboring village, and then from neighboring villages to neighboring districts, from neighboring states, and then actually that awareness can spread over the country, and at the world level also that awareness can be created. And these days actually dedicated websites also can be designed for this purpose. So that that commodification should not only be made for business perspective, however other perspectives must be taken into consideration. Probably this is the only lacking why actually many tourism commodified products are not being demanded in these days.
Thank you very much, sir. So, any other question from the audience? Sir, there is a request from our side. If you could share your slides with us so that we can share the resource with the participants.
Definitely.
So now I'd like to request our HOD sir to say a few words.
So lastly, definitely I will thank Professor P.K. Misra, Central University of Punjab, as he is my teacher, my guru, and definitely I'll be much more thankful to him because due to his kind consent and consideration for our AICT Atal FDP and for his insightful, informative and resourceful presentation today, I'm very much thankful to you. And in future, definitely our department will seek your cooperation for this type of academic activities. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you, Namaskar. I am really thankful to your department, to Mizoram University, giving me an opportunity to speak in this Urdu program, faculty development program, Atal. Thank you very much. Thank you all organizers.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, now dear participants, we'll take a break for half an hour and we'll join exactly at 11:55 p.m. for the second session of the day 4. Thank you very much.